My name is Matt Young. I'm a licensed architect. I work on the product team at Amber Book, those of us who work on the course and other curriculum. Joining me today is Ralph Hale, who also works on the product team and who has passed all of his AREs. And we wanted to try something a little new today, maybe have a little fun. And so the idea here is that I've taken some questions from NCARB's PPD practice exam, ones that Ralph has not seen before. We're all going to be answering them together. I'm going to set a 2-minute timer for each question. I'll launch a poll. Everyone can interact with that if you'd like, and then we'll see how good Ralph is. We'll see how he thinks through problems. We'll see how everyone else in the audience is doing. And hopefully we'll all have a little bit of fun. So if everyone's ready, I'm going to start the first question. Let's see, I got to pull up my timer. Okay.
And I'm going to go ahead and circle mine.
Yep.
And
okay. So Ralph's answers are C, D, and E. Our results say that most people think C, D, and A. And the correct answers are A, C, and E.
Oh, interesting.
So 2 out of 3 for Ralph, and I would say 2 out of 3 for the crowd. So let's Ralph, let's go to this slide and talk us through why you thought it was D, and
why it is A.
Why it is A.
Yeah. So I can already tell you. We'll get to it, but I know the what's going on here. All right. So we have a proposed site, right? So the site's not been selected yet. It's for an elementary school. That's not particularly important, but we've gone to the site. We've spotted some things. The adjacent property is uphill, and there's a lot of erosion on it, right? We've also got sediment and soil deposits. Now, sediment and soil deposits is why my head went to geotechnical investigation reports, because a geotechnical report is among other things going to include a soil boring log. If some of the sediment that has come downhill is something that's not going to be suitable to build on, you're going to get that's going to identify those layers immediately. And I can tell you right now, they put geotechnical investigation reports on specifically to catch that line of logic.
Mm-hmm.
The important thing, though, is that this is a proposed site. So we really need to be working from material that will be in existence at the time that the proposed site will. So a topographic survey might or might not have been made by that point, but topographic maps for areas do already exist that will let you get some sense of what the slope is there. Now, the other thing is, so we see large amounts of sediment and soil deposits. That says to me, flooding might be an issue. The next line says signs of vegetation debris collected in piles throughout the site. Debris collects in piles on sites where flooding has washed over the site. Mm-hmm. So that's FEMA all day long.
Yeah.
We have a site with slopes, so that's topography. USDA land surveys may also get into soil types and that sort of thing, but the question that's given here is really asking about. It's talking about flooding. It's talking about slope. It's talking about those sorts of things. USDA land surveys are getting into soil quality for growing stuff. Zoning maps applicable to the site. This question is not asking anything about those things. Now, if there were no other good answers, maybe, but we should like two things. One, an elementary school is typically a public building, so the zoning ought to be sorted out for that anyway. And then the other thing is you should be selecting sites that are either zoned well or that are going to be zonable. So that's just not really relevant at this stage of the project, especially for the kind of project we're talking about.
Right. Can I butt in real quick?
Yep.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of summarize that, the trick here with the geotechnical investigation reports is that though that is valuable to this question, to this inquiry, that is kind of at the next stage of the project. So they're kind of catching you thinking a little bit ahead. Right? Yep.
Whereas USGS maps are going to be available and they'll show slope, they'll show soil types in a way that the geotechnical investigation reports will then be able to confirm. They'll show underlying rock strata. So if there's sediment there that's super deep, a USGS map might indicate that to you. USGS maps can also indicate areas of landslide risk.
Sure.
In some places. And if we've got a lot of erosion coming downhill, that's something that might be worth paying attention to. But yeah.
All right, great. Let's clear the drawings. Good job, everyone. I see I'm not able to pay too close attention to it, but I see some really good conversations happening in the chat. And we're going to move on to our next question. We're about 30 seconds in. And just to be clear, the reason why we're setting the poll open for 2 minutes is because we estimate that that's about as much time as you have per question. So we are trying to simulate how much time you might, the kind of feel of how much time you might need per question on the exam. All right, here we go. I'm going to share the results real quick. Ralph answers D. The majority of our attendees today. And one thing I want to highlight is that, the thing that jumps out to me is of everyone who answered, 65% answered it correct, which is about what you want to be thinking about in terms of performance on the ARIES. Where cut scores kind of live is around that 2/3 mark. So it's not exactly the same, but seeing that, about 2/3 of the folks got it right, that's exactly where you want to be. So good job, everybody. Ralph, want to go ahead and talk us through how you would answer this question?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you close the question by chance, or do I have to close that on my end?
I believe I just stopped sharing the results.
All right. Hold on. I have to close the annotation, close the question poll, and then pull my annotation back up. But here we go. Okay. So we're specifying for exposed metal. So whatever finish we're going to be picking is going to need to be relatively durable, rust resistant, that sort of thing. And we're looking for a sustainable finish. I can tell you right now, chrome plating, the process to chrome plate is horrifically bad for the environment. Chrome plating is what you see on all of the trim pieces for the 1950s, 1960s automobiles. There's just chrome everywhere. We don't do that anymore, partly because it's a fairly expensive process, and also partly because both chromium and the chemicals involved in depositing chromium on metal are really, really nasty. Epoxy paint, right? Epoxy is a resin. If you're painting with a liquid paint, the brushes have cleanup. We have VOCs that are going in the air, that sort of thing. Lacquer is typically derived from a tree resin, which may or may not be sustainable, but lacquer as a coating is another fairly nasty thing to put onto a product. the tree that lacquer comes from is fairly closely related to poison ivy and poison sumac that we have here. So it's really not something that you as a person want to be exposed to. And I think there are also polymer lacquers, so that lacquer might be referring to a finish that is an inorganic or not inorganic, but a manufactured lacquer. Also not going to be all that great. And again, like with epoxy, it's a liquid. Liquids are going to be nastier for the environment. Powder coating. The powder coating process, typically, you charge the item to be painted with an electrostatic charge, so it's sticky, but it's magnetically sticky, not adhesively sticky. And then the paint powder is given an opposing charge, and you basically flood an enclosed room with that powder. With the charges opposite, so the powder clings specifically to the product, and then you bake it in an oven. So there's relatively little waste that you're having to dispose of as a liquid into the drains and otherwise treat. I went back and forth between powder coating and lacquer. So you'll see here, what do I know about this? What do I know about the items in the answer choices? I know that chrome is nasty. We're talking about sustainable finishes. Chrome is not a sustainable finish. So let's just go ahead and mark that one off now. So now I'm down to 1 out of 3 to pick from. I'm pretty confident that it's not epoxy paint because, again, of the cleanup issues associated with especially larger volumes of a liquid resin paint. And the VOCs associated with plastic resins. So we mark that out. That leaves me with lacquer and powder coating. I went back and forth on that. Powder coating is what's used to paint cars now for most vehicles. If the automotive industry is using it, it's probably not really nasty to use in that volume now, because the cleanup costs, like, they're going to be picking a durable, but also they're going to be picking the most durable, but also the kind of least associated cost and regulatory burden in terms of their paint shops as well. And again, lacquer, I don't know if we're talking about a naturally derived lacquer or a manufactured synthetic lacquer. But it has ultimately the same problems as the epoxy paint, which is why I ended up going with powder coating. But it took me a little bit to arrive at that.
Right. And my thought there is when you're choosing between the two, there's no version of powder coating that involves solvents or petroleum products where there is potential lacquers that do. So when you're kind of, Ralph and I talk about how on the ARE, you're going to be choosing between not answers that one answer choice that's 100% correct and perfect, and every other answer choice is super, super wrong. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes there's a spectrum of correctness. And so when you're having to when you've whittled it down, you have to differentiate between the two. It can be really helpful to kind of run through that extra, memory of what's going on.
And you should always be looking to both at the same time eliminate incorrect answers and also target correct answers, right? So it's you've got to approach the problem from both directions. And the other thing to do is it never hurts. You should always go back and skim the question again.
Sure.
It's important to make sure you didn't miss anything. Exposed metal, sustainable finish. There for a second in my head, I was like, okay, it's exposed metal. By exposed metal, do we mean, before I read the answer choices, I was expecting our answer choices to be something along the lines of stainless steel and copper and that sort of thing. Until I got into it a little bit more. So read the question, read the answer choices. The order you read the answer choices in, to me, doesn't really matter. I kind of like to start with the bottom and work my way back up. So start with D and work back to A, just to kind of give your brain that little extra push to not jump to too many conclusions. But yeah,
great. All right, so far we've got Ralph is one of two. If you'll clear your drawings, Ralph.
All right.
I'd say the audience is one of two as well. We're going to move on to question number 3. Let's see if I can. Yeah, it's question 3. All right, I'm going to start the poll. All right.
I'll go ahead and say I don't love some of my answers here, but we can talk about why.
We'll talk about it. So Ralph selected DEF. The overwhelming majority of the audience chose the right answers, which are A, C, F. Good job, everybody. I think now we can say that the audience is 2 of 3 and you're 1 of 3. So you're gonna have to make a little bit of a comeback here. But let's talk through the answers here and maybe get a little insight into what you're saying about not feeling great about your answers.
So I eliminated the compacted gravel path kind of right out of the gate. I'm assuming sport court amenities are something people might want to walk to. This is a condo project. Condo projects can be somewhat litigious. Compacted gravel paths, from a maintenance perspective, are more difficult to keep ADA compliant. So I would be hesitant as the architect to say that a compacted gravel path is necessarily is necessarily going to be a great decision for a condo project, where I would expect people are going to want to walk on this path. We know it's meant to be an electric cart path. Like it's the golf cart path, right? It's the golf cart path for a golf course is what this is. People walk along those all the time. I'd be hesitant to choose compacted gravel there. They can be made ADA compliant though, so I can see NCARB's logic here. Right. If you take
because it
away,
costs less.
Yeah, it will absolutely cost less, and if you take away the added risk of one of the condominium members suing for a lack of ADA compliance, then we're box ticked. A is a perfectly fine choice. Pervious concrete is going to be more expensive, so that was one that I also tossed out right out of the gate. I went back and forth on C, specifically C and E as the two. I ended up going with E, just because I don't know. We have 36 carts. That's quite a lot of carts. It doesn't say how long this loop is, but if a lot of those carts are out, if we're reducing the path for the 4-foot wide carts to 6 feet with limited passing lanes, that starts to sound like a significant reduction in utility to me. And that's where and again, this was another one that I was kind of between it and modifying the existing grade to reduce undulations. Earthwork should be cheaper than the concrete, but it's not a great trade-off there. And earthwork does cost some money, right? Especially if we're having to do compacting to make sure that things aren't moving around. And if it's like, it doesn't say golf course, but if it's a golf course, the undulations of the grade are kind of a feature of, not a bug.
Sure.
I'm reading into the question a little bit more than's given there, but
if I can jump in, Ralph, one of the things that I kind of like to look for in these multi-select questions that NCARB does is to kind of group together the strategies that they're proposing, right? And so the reducing the width of the path, redesigning the path to make it more direct, changing the material of the path. In one case, obviously, we've got pervious concrete, which is more expensive. That's a lost leader right there. But it's kind of the A, C, and F are also all kind of in a general category of strategy. whereas in terms of decisions that affect the path.
Mm-hmm.
And
E is not.
And as well as though D is, it's you're affecting that change through a different means.
Through the landscape, not through the path itself. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one way that I kind of like to look through these questions, is to kind of filter or sort what are these options have in common with each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. All right, so let's move on. So far so good. I think our enrollees are on track to pass this exam, and you need to make it up on these.
I got to pick it up.
So let's clear your drawings and move on.
All right.
All right, here we go. All right. Great job to everyone on this one. Audience overwhelmingly got this correct. Really good job. And fortunately for you, Ralph, you are close to making the save here. So just as a recap for everyone, the audience is 3 of 4, 75% correct. Ralph's at 2 of 4, 50%. He can make it up here, but and we've got about 5 minutes left in the call, Ralph. So
okay,
let's
see where we're at.
Since everyone did really well, let's run through this one a little quick so we can get to the next one. All right, great. So how'd you think about this?
All right, so reading through, we're checking 4 that apply. We have a cast in place concrete parking garage, right? So this is concrete that's being poured on site. We're in schematic design. We want to add something below grade, and it's a mixed-use building. So we've got houses on top of it. We're putting houses on top of cars. We're enclosing parking below grade, so ventilation is going to be important there. It's not going to be facade budget because the facade shouldn't be changing, right? All of our changes are below grade. Subsoil conditions, if the subsoil is bad for digging into, or wet, or muddy, or whatever, then that's going to be something that we've got to get sorted. Also, if we're on a sloped site, if there's rock 1.5 feet below ground, then our excavation might be obscenely expensive. What's the neighborhood like around it? Is this a greenfield, undeveloped site that has nothing around it? Then we might be able to blast rock out without it costing that much. But if we're in town, that's a problem. Number of exits, we're increasing the amount of people and things that we're trying to get out of a specific area. So that was why I selected number of exits over prevailing wind direction. Prevailing wind direction shouldn't really affect anything there as I read it. Now, if it was, maximum wind speed, that sort of thing, I could see that being an issue. Prevailing wind direction might be a problem, though, if the wind is coming from, we'll say, downslope, you have your opening downslope, and so the wind is forcing all of our exhaust gases to stay in the space. In my head ventilation requirements, we're taking care of that.
Excellent. Couldn't agree more. All right, let's clear your drawings and let's get into the last question.
So were those the correct 4 answers?
Those were the correct 4 answers.
Okay, good.
You got them right, as well as our audience.
Woo! All
right, here we go. Oh yeah, I apologize.
You didn't give me the clarification there. So
yeah, my bad. All right, so I'm only 3 for 4 at this point, right?
Yeah,
that's a moderator. Here we go. All right, here's number 5. The tough one. All right, about 5 seconds left. And I need you to lock it in before I share the answer.
All right. I'm going to go with this one.
All right. All right. All right. Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
And it's
you got the
either
correct
C or
answer.
I did. I was
You
going to
got
say
the
it's
correct
either C or
answer.
D.
Yes, and a majority of the audience also got the correct answer.
A plurality of the audience got the correct answer.
Sure. True. So,
which is
awesome.
For a question like this is pretty good.
Yeah, awesome job. Awesome job, everyone. So, Ralph, how do you? I picked this one specifically because sometimes, yes, you're going to get questions on the exam that are going to catch you off guard. They're going to feel like something you have no clue about, but there are
clues.
You have information in front of you,
clues.
Right? There are clues here. So, what are some of the clues you picked up on? How did you start thinking through this question?
All right. So we're working with recessed 2-lamp fixtures in an acrylic shield, which is not really important information, I don't think. To fit in, well, it may be, but we'll see. To fit into the existing ceiling grid in the restrooms. The fixtures have to be compatible with the replacement bulbs that the maintenance department stores in the warehouse. The engineer visits the warehouse and observes that the maintenance group stocks 1-inch diameter straight tubular bulbs. Those are fluorescent tubes, just like you can see behind me here, basically. So reading the answer choices, we have 50, which tells me almost nothing. We have a G, which is the same across all of them. We have an X. And then we have 2, 4, 2, 17 on 3 of the 4. And then we have 2, 2, 2, 14T5S. Now, 14T5S is I'm pretty sure that's the bulb. And I say that specifically because I changed some of these bulbs not that long ago, and I'm almost certain they're 14T5Ss. And I know for a fact they're not 1-inch diameter. They're quite a bit smaller than 1-inch diameter. But reading a little further along, we have some A19156 and some A12125, AMW F338, EB2, and then 227 and 120. Now, 227 volts is, if I remember correctly, one of the voltages that you can get off of 3-phase power. 120 is, of course, standard voltage for more standard places. So I'm just making an assumption here that probably the bulbs that this guy's looking at, being because there are only two. Well, I thought that I read something, and maybe I misread that. 1-inch diameter straight tubular bulbs. So I made a hunch of a little bit of a guess that we're probably talking about a 120 volt system and not a 120 volt single phase system rather than a 3-phase system. So you can 3-phase lighting is kind of weird. It's right. Unusual, and I would not expect 1-inch diameter straight tubular bulbs using an acrylic shield. Right. So if the shield's acrylic, we're not dealing with a lot of heat there either. I'm skeptical that 3-phase power is going to be involved with an acrylic shielded fluorescent lighting system.
Which eliminates for you A and B.
For me, that eliminates A and B. But you've got 17F, and then you've got the A19156, and then A12125. I'm assuming one of those numbers might also be a material differentiator. But the main thing is the last half of both of these is the same for 2 of the 4 answers in both cases, right? We have A19156 through the end is the same for the first 2, and A12125 is the same for the latter 2. So now I'm looking in, well, 14 is smaller than 17, and then I've got a bunch of 2s, and then I've got 242, and then 242, or 224 differentiating the upper bit here. And so I just on a hunch, I know 1-inch tubes are a little more common. So I'm thinking if as NCARB is writing the answer choices, if 1-inch tubes are a little more common, they're probably going to give me more than one 1-inch choice, and then one that is a weird choice, but that's otherwise not necessarily, like, some of these are probably not straight bulbs. So I went with C more or less on a hunch, but I was working between C and D.
Yeah, and I think that you really touched on some important things here. Also, for I think some of y'all, we mentioned it at the beginning, but we're pulling this directly from NCARB's PPD practice exam that they have available online. Mm-hmm. I really liked that you said that you're thinking that some of this is referring to a material, because in their explanation, they identified that this AMW is antimicrobial white. That means, but yeah, you can look at this question structurally, and if you eliminate these options because they're 277, and then so these are gone, right?
So we're down to 50-50.
We're down to 50-50, and the only difference between the two is between these, right? Mm-hmm. The only difference, and so in this case, 17 is referring to the watts. Yeah. So the difference between the two is that we're referring to the watts, but also, right, T5S
is a bulb shape.
Is a bulb shape.
Yep.
So because there's no, in that
it's
way,
linear unless it's a linear bulb, unless it's not.
Sure.
Is the nature of the specification.
And I think if we're looking through the information on the question, it's describing something a bit more uniform, right? And so answer option C, in contrast to D, but other options as well, is pretty uniform, right? Not a whole lot of variation. So great job there.
And if you can get 50% of these kinds of questions right, that'll probably give you another 5% on the exam to add to your score.
Right.
Because there'll be 10% that are out of the blue, just like this question.
Right. And my recommendation often with these is come back to it when you have a little more time.
Yeah.
To me, this feels like a low probability question, and so I would focus your energy, especially in the beginning of the exam, on a question that you feel good about. Something like maybe the metal coating question that we had earlier on.
Yeah.
And then since I've got my drawing going, just for a recap. Ralph was 3 out of 5. I'm going to try to use my mouse,
which is 60%.
60%. So probably passed some AREs, but our audience was 4 of 5. 80%. I think that passes every ARE. So
yeah,
it definitely does for PPD. Actually, if we're talking about PPD, the cut score range is 65 to 71%. So Ralph does not pass, and let me change to green. The audience does. So Woo! Great job. I think everyone should be feeling pretty good about that. And I know we've gone over time a little bit, but we can open up for a question or two if anyone has anything specific they want to ask.
I'll lead into this with the note that I didn't study for this quiz either.
No, these are all, just like for most of our attendees, these are all
brand new.
Brand new. Or potentially, maybe some have taken this practice exam. All right, I'm gonna Alejandro has their hand raised, so I'm gonna I lost it. Oh, there we go. Here we go.
This was a good experience. I'm wondering how many questions are going to be about specifications regarding like very technical criteria like this last one.
I wouldn't expect more than that. Again, that 10%, you'll see 10% of off the wall questions like this one especially with PPD and PDD. At 10% might even be high.
If you want to get a greater sense, I'd recommend going and looking at NCARB's guidelines document for ARE 5.0. They have specific percentage breakdowns per exam, and with descriptions of what these categories are. And you'll see that for PPD, for example, there's going to be plenty of questions about space planning or site planning, things that aren't specific in this kind of way. So I wouldn't think that this is an overwhelming majority. This kind of question is not an overwhelming majority.
Could I ask a two-part? Just a quick follow-up. Is this something that could be found on, say, master format or something like that, where it's broken down into 3 sections? Basically, like, I mean, I don't know if I'm understanding it as what is it, like general or assembly and installation, or general product and installation. But if that's is this something that's, I could read it like that, as like a 3-part?
That's exactly how it breaks down. 50 is referring to air troffer. G is the ceiling type for grid. So yeah, it's formatted in such a way.
But it's not. This isn't in master format.
I see.
I don't think.
I don't know for certain, to be honest.
I mean, that's probably an ANSI specification if I had to guess. But this is the kind of thing that I wouldn't spend a lot of time, studying light bulb specs.
Not at all.
Like, don't do that.
Yeah. Awesome. And we've got another question from, and I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, VOL.
Sorry. So going back to the question about value engineering, if you don't mind going back on the slides, I was wondering about, my way to digest this, because I really haven't started yet studying for PDD. I'm just going over the course itself and different subjects. But for me, what caught my eye is, well, I know what value engineering means. I know the difference between value engineering and cost cutting, which is something that I've read NCARB like punches a lot, like understanding the difference. So for me, it was really more about, okay, what are the options that are not really lowering the quality, or just as a way, like I really didn't need to understand that much deep the answers, just to understand what answer really doesn't affect quality, what answer really doesn't affect the scope, what answer fixes it or reduces the price without it. And on that note, I really didn't know about pricing on the options, but just crossing out the ones that were affecting quality, scope, that gave easily an answer.
Yeah,
so
that's an absolutely fantastic way to approach it.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in first. I'm so glad that you said scope, because that is the, if we're talking about how NCARB looks at this kind of thing, that is one of the main criteria that they're trying to make sure that you understand about value engineering, is that it isn't changing the scope. And one thing that we didn't talk about is modifying the existing grade to reduce undulations would be a change in scope, right? We would be adding additional earthwork, right? So I'm really glad you brought that up. What do you think, Ralph?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That I would think that would also probably get the reducing the number of carts in the garage answer, and just knock that out right there.
Right.
Amazing. And thank you.
And that also kind of raises another good point, that it's often, for these, especially these check multiples, it's often easier to eliminate wrong answers than it is to positively identify correct ones.
At least I believe that's like the way to go when you don't really know the answer.
Yeah. You have to work from both directions most of the time, but sometimes eliminating incorrect ones is more important than selecting the right ones. And you'll see some questions that you just know the answer to, and go ahead and select that and move on. But when you don't know that,
sorry,
go ahead.
No, go, keep going. I'll
Well,
ask later.
Okay, well, just when you don't know the answer for sure, that's what you have to do. You have to work from what you know isn't the right answer.
Exactly.
Right.
And just like you work on that last question with so many numbers that nobody understood, you just try to cross what makes sense to you.
Yep.
out.
Yep.
And on the one that actually, the one that added the extra garage level on underground,
Oh yeah.
where we were seeing the options. Do you mind repeating again why the number of exits provided was an answer?
So
How does it affect it?
So my logic there, right, is that we have a building above grade, and the building is entirely above grade, and we want to add a basement level. So we're adding occupancy area to the building without increasing the perimeter of the building or anything like that, and it's on a sloped site. Yeah. But the point being, we're digging down into the ground. We may be adding occupancy that's going to need to get out. Do we have sufficient area for that occupancy?
Interesting. Okay.
Or do we have sufficient exits for that extra occupancy?
Makes sense. Amazing. Okay. On the code there, yeah. Yeah, makes completely sense. I was thinking more about the other one, the prevailing wind direction.
That was the distractor that I sat on for a bit.
Distracting me a lot because I was thinking, well, maybe are we thinking of reinforcing the structure because we're going deeper? What kind of stuff are we doing? So do we have to maybe take care of that? So that would be like an answer. I didn't know really.
So if we're talking about reinforcing the structure because of wind loads and that sort of thing, I would have expected that answer to be not prevailing wind direction, but wind speed.
I mean, also that would have also be taken care of, even if we're not going down deep.
Yeah.
So maybe...
And we're getting into we're digging really under where the wind load is going to be. Obviously, the foundations that are surrounding this lower level, the basement walls that are surrounding this lower level of parking, and the foundations below them are going to need to be able to support any wind loads above it. But to me, the prevailing wind direction is really kind of taken care of by ventilation requirements. And then the wind load thing, this doesn't say anything about wind load. It says prevailing wind direction. Whether the winds are quartering or something will in some cases matter, but it's not really a big enough building, and prevailing wind direction is not the same as wind load.
And I think too, when we think about it from a structural perspective, I have two thoughts here. One is from a structural perspective, if we're building taller, prevailing wind direction is going to have more of an impact than building down. And the other thing is that while this line of thought is valid, right? Wind direction, wind is going to kind of affect our overall balance of our structure as we're changing its sort of volume. I think that it's not the most correct answer, right? So it's not going to be our first choice.
These other four choices are better choice. So facade budget you can eliminate as a definitely wrong one. And then I think you can pick these other four as better answers than prevailing wind direction. I could also see prevailing wind direction affecting our ventilation if our garage exit is kind of downslope and the garage is all built into the slope. So now the wind is pushing the exhaust gases back into the garage, but our ventilation requirements should take care of that if we've reviewed them. Yeah, the whole point of ventilation requirements is to account for those kinds of conditions. So it's better. So those four answers are better than D.
Yep. I'm going to be conscientious of time. We appreciate that everyone who's stuck with us a little bit longer here. Hope you had some fun with this. Let us know if you'd want us to do something like this again. I think we had fun with this. I think Ralph might want to redeem himself, maybe, or maybe next time I answer the questions and you put me to the test, right?
All right.
So we could see
do a bunch of pro practicey contractsy stuff.
That could be fun. That could be fun.
That was the test I got to retake.
Right. Right. I like that attitude. You got to retake it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Hope everyone has a good night. And as always, go get licensed.
Good night, get licensed, have fun.
Yep.